Just over 20 years ago, the Queensland Government brought in legislation to control land clearing in Queensland. The Vegetation Management Act, or VMA, now regulates clearing across 80% of the state. At times, this legislation has been controversial. The interests of conservationists and rural landholders are often seen as conflicting. But where are we at now? We interviewed a group of landholders and experts from different areas of Queensland to share their views about management issues arising from the current legislation. Thanks for agreeing to talk to us today. I was wondering if, first of all, you could tell us a little bit about yourselves and your farming property up there.
Yeah, basically, we're totally native vegetation, apart from our flooded country, which we crop. We're bounding on around about 50,000 acres that we run here at the moment. We have a lot of difference in the management either side of the state border, of course.
I'm in central West Queensland. I'm 68 kilometres north of the township of Jericho. Myself and my family, we're beef cattle producers, but we've got a strong vision to be regenerative and sustainable.
So when we're talking about native vegetation, what sort of proportion of that would be tree cover or?
There are trees on all the country, and what we strive for is ever increasing our ground cover, which we have to do with naturally managing the tree cover. And those commodities, your animals, your trees and your grasses, to manage those in the right balances, you end up with the right soil management that is absolutely essential. Otherwise, everything else fails. So, yeah, it's a challenge, and that's an area that we've been frustrated with under the VMA.
Absolutely, and too many trees and bare ground underneath, and you'd start getting the most horrific erosion, which we have got in spots, simply because we haven't been able to limit the number of trees that were growing.
Unfortunately, when we talk of climate change, it is so easy, and I alluded to, the catch cry is that everybody wants to think that they're contributing. Now, we have to change the paradigm. We need the politicians and the general public to understand that we're not just knocking down trees. And we need, rather than the environmental agencies, we need the department to be proactive in giving more people more information of how they can do the job properly.
They're supporting landowners for carbon sequestration, but they're actually going to reward the landowners that have done the worst at looking after their land, because they've got the most to gain in sequestering more carbon. But those landowners that have made the sacrifices and applied themselves and tried to look after the country the best, they're basically being ignored because they've got maximum carbon or a lot of carbon sequestration already. Landowners that have done the worst have got the most to gain. So the message through the industry is, well, that you can look after your country, the bigger the opportunity you have of getting some financial rewards.
What would be your priorities there for getting things moving and being able to manage your land better for better results?
The whole industry really, if it isn't going through a transitional phase, it should be go through that phase, because prior generations, I suppose, came out to the landscape, and a lot of the issues we're facing now hadn't started to occur, or they hadn't caused them, because the land had high carbon content and a lot better biodiversity, a lot better ground cover. But once issues, especially erosion, occur, it's a compounding factor to have a sustainable and regenerative landscape where like maximum water cycle, maximum ground cover, maximum biodiversity and minimum erosion. We need to step back and say, righto, what are the factors we need to have in place so we do grow maximum grass from any rain event? When you consider that we don't know when those rain events will occur, how they're going to occur, how frequently, we need to be very mindful and proactive in the factors we're applying to our land management.
I do feel like the government, there have been some government programs and some government funding for example, the barrier reef funding, reducing runoff and things like that. And that funding has been really helpful for the land owners that could access it. because they can access training to help them sort of adapt and be more resilient and sort of regenerate the landscapes that they're on. And if we could have some funding that went towards education and the capital needed for the transition over to regenerative practices that would help to start really drawing that carbon down into the soil again and improving soil health, that would be excellent. And I don't know how you do that. You know, people pay offsets to plant a tree. Well, maybe you could also choose to, you know, pay an offset that would help a farmer to look after their soil and to store carbon in the soil as well. I think that would be really helpful.
AgForce is a membership organisation for broadacre agriculture in Queensland. And obviously members join AgForce for a representation for their interests. My role in AgForce is to represent members' interests in the areas of landscape management, land use protection. Landscape management has been, part of the reason why AgForce formed in the first place. And the interest that members have in landscape management is long term. And the committee, I was talking about the Landscape Management Committee that's so highly engaged in this space. The policy priorities that we've developed thus far are very much related to landscape management as opposed to the predominant focus on vegetation management. So we want to extend that view of things considerably. And I guess the difference in what we've been doing currently compared to the history of AgForce is that rather than defend landholders' positions in terms of a regulatory instrument, we're keen on looking, if we look at landscape management in its whole broader sense, how do we work with different instruments to achieve landscape management? Rather than just regulation, are there other instruments that we can use and employ to help work with land managers to achieve sustainable landscape management through time? AgForce has never been advocating for broad-scale clearing, and that is a key point to make. So landholders and members of AgForce to a T are concerned about their environment. It's in their interest to have a healthy farm, healthy property. And so AgForce has never really been about advocating for large-scale broadacre clearing. We're about looking for landscape sustainability and landscape management. And to achieve sustainable landscapes, we need to ensure that the ecosystems and the natural assets that we have in our environment are linking and working together to create a healthy farm, a healthy property that's within a healthy landscape.
The feedback from landholders and their representatives is that we need to transition to a more holistic management regime. We next asked experts in the field about their views on bringing about change and innovation.
So currently I'm what's called a Principal Natural Resource Management Officer. So I work out of the Charleville office with the Veg Hub in Charleville. So the guys that answer the bulk of the questions that come in from landholders. So once upon a time we'd rock up at field days, but these days we've tried to move into the webinar world and we had some interesting results. So initially we kicked off doing what we used to do, which is kind of send out an invite for a webinar because we couldn't do it face to face. We'd have 30, 40 landholders show up to that. And we just found that was difficult because at a field day, you kind of have these, you have your lunch and your smoko and the landholders can come and talk to you one-on-one. You can often pull up a map on the computer and go through that. But that just wasn't possible with these webinars. So we tried a different thing where we started kind of leveraging the efficiency that we got out of not travelling 3 hours to a field day to run these webinars more regularly and at different times. So we put them on at 10 o'clock one day and then the next day they'll be at 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. And we capped the numbers to about 5 landholders. And we're getting some really good results there. And we're actually being able to pass on some really sort of technical training to landholders. So with a lot of these codes, one of the reasons they're complex is because, we just have a lot of stakeholder input. They adjust quite regularly, these codes, based on stakeholder input. So when we go to the field days, we actually send information where people are struggling with an aspect of the code. or an aspect of the code just doesn't work, we forward that up to the policy people. They'll discuss it, and often you'll find a little change will be made to the codes. So it'll be put under the minister's nose for a sign off, and you'll get a little update to the code, just to make it a little bit easier to use, or to get rid of some problem that just isn't functional.
Now, I understand you're a scientist working with the CSIRO, and a few years ago you were involved in a project identifying priority management actions for imperiled species in the Brigalow Belt. It sounds like a really interesting project. Can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, that was a really interesting project because the Brigalow Belt in Queensland is a national biodiversity hotspot for wildlife. In this project, we look at what were the best ways to conserve these threatened species while trying to balance all these competing uses for the region at the same time. Really interesting thing that happened in our workshop was that at the last day, someone said that nothing was going to change unless the different stakeholders in the region got together and build a common vision that helped everyone get together and find which were the shared goals that could balance the three aspects of like the environment, the social and the economic development in the region. After that, everyone got very excited and they said, yes, unless we build such a common vision, the other management strategies are not going to work as well.
And so do you think your project helped in a little stage towards building that common vision?
Well, I hope so. I like to think it did. But at least it created that open space for people to think about it. And now what we just need to do is finding the champion that would like to drive such a common vision and get it all implemented.
I wish that it just wasn't quite so divisive to speak about climate change or to be a farmer and also speak about environmental issues. I feel like really deep down, we all want the same things. We want, a healthy environment and beautiful landscape around us and to all be able to coexist and have sustainable lives. And it just seems a shame if we get so caught up in debating the issue that we lose focus of the solutions and moving forward. So, I just really hope that we can do that soon. Just get on with the job of, making things right.